The Ogre and the Sufi. A Sufi master travelling alone through a desolate mountain region was suddenly faced by an ogre, a giant ghoul, who told him that he was going to destroy him. The master said, "Very well, try if you like, but I can overcome you, for I am immensely powerful in more ways than you think."
"Nonsense," said the ghoul. "You are a Sufi master interested in spiritual things. You cannot overcome me, because I rely upon brute force, and I am 30 times larger than you."
"If you want a trial of strength," said the Sufi, "take this stone and squeeze liquid out of it." He picked up a small piece of rock and handed it to the apparition. Try as he might, the ghoul could not.
"It is impossible. There is no water in this stone. You show me if there is."
In the half-darkness, the master took the stone, took an egg out of his pocket, and squeezed the two together, holding his hand over that of the ghoul. The ghoul was impressed, for people are often impressed by things that they do not understand, and value such things highly, more highly than they should in their own interests.
"I must think this over," he said. "Come to my cave, and I shall give you hospitality for the night."
The Sufi accompanied him to an immense cave, strewn with the belongings of thousands of murdered travellers, a veritable Aladdin's cavern.
"Lie here beside me and sleep," said the ghoul, "and we will try conclusions in the morning."
He lay down and immediately fell asleep. The master, instinctively warned of treachery, suddenly felt a prompting to get up and conceal himself at some distance from the ghoul. This he did, after arranging the bed to give the impression that he was still in it. No sooner was he sat a safe distance than the ghoul awoke. He picked up a tree trunk with one hand and dealt the dummy in the bed 7 mighty clouts. Then he lay down again and went to sleep. The master returned to his bed, lay down, and called to the ghoul. "O ghoul, this cavern of yours is comfortable, but I have been bitten 7 times by a mosquito. You really should do something about it." This shocked the ghoul so much that he dared not attempt a further attack. After all, if a man had been hit 7 times by a ghoul wielding a tree trunk with all the force he had. In the morning the ghoul threw the Sufi a whole ox skin and said, "Bring some water for breakfast so that we can make tea." Instead of picking up the skin, which he could hardly have lifted in any case, the master walked to the nearby stream and started to dig a small channel towards the cave. The ghoul was getting thirsty.
"Why don't you bring the water?"
"Patience, my friend. I am making a permanent channel to bring the spring water right to the mouth of the cavern, so that you will never have to carry a water skin." But the ghoul was too thirsty to wait. Picking up the skin, he strode to the river and filled it himself. When the tea was made, he drank several gallons, and his reasoning faculties began to work a little better.
"If you are so strong, and you have given me proof of it, why can't you dig that channel faster instead of inch by inch?"
"Because," said the master, "nothing which is truly worth doing can be properly done without the expenditure of a minimum amount of effort. Everything has its own quantity of effort, and I am applying the minimum necessary effort to the digging of the canal. Besides, I knew that you are such a creature of habit that you will always use the ox skin." This story is often heard in tea-houses in Central Asia, and resembles folkloric tales of the Europe of the Middle Ages. The present version is from a majmua, or a dervish collection, originally written by Hikayati in the 11th century, according to the colophon, but in the form given here apparently dating from the 16th century. The Merchant and the Christian Dervish. A rich merchant of Tabriz came to Konya, looking for the wisest man there, for he was in trouble. After trying to get advice from the religious leaders, the lawyers, and others, he heard of Rumi, to whom he was taken. He took with him 50 gold pieces as an offering. When he saw the Maulana in the audition hall, he was overcome with emotion. Jalaluddin said to him, "Your 50 coins are accepted, but you have lost 200, which is why you are here. God has punished you and is showing you something. Now all will be well with you." The merchant was amazed at what the Maulana knew. Rumi continued, "You have had many troubles because one day in the far west of Christendom you saw a Christian dervish lying in the street. You spat at him. Go to him and ask forgiveness, and give him our salutations." As the merchant stood terrified at the reading of his mind, Jalaluddin said, "Shall we show him to you now?" He touched the wall of the room, and the merchant saw the scene of the saint in the marketplace in Europe. He reeled away from the master's presence, completely nonplussed. Travelling as fast as he could to the Christian sage, he found him lying prostrate on the ground. As he approached him, the Frankish dervish said, "Our master Jalal has communicated with me." The merchant looked in the direction in which the dervish was pointing, and saw, as in a picture, Jalaluddin chanting such words as these: "Whether a ruby or a pebble, there is a place on his hill, there is a place for all." The merchant carried back the greetings of the Frankish saint to Jalal, and settled down in the community of the Dervishes at Konya. The extent of Jalaluddin Rumi's influence upon the thought and literature of the West is today slowly becoming apparent through academic research. There is no doubt that he had many Western disciples, and his stories appear in the Hans Andersen tales, in the Gesta Romanorum of 1324, even in Shakespeare. In the East, there is considerable traditional insistence upon his close connection with Western mystics and thinkers. This version of The Merchant and the Christian Dervish is translated from Aflaki's Munakib al-Arifin, the lives of early Mevlevi dervishes, completed in 1353. The Golden Fortune. Once upon a time there was a merchant named Abdul Malik. He was known as the Good Man of Khorasan, because from his immense fortune he used to give to charity and hold feasts for the poor. But one day it occurred to him that he was simply giving away some of what he had, and that the pleasure which he obtained through his generosity was far in excess of what it really cost him to sacrifice what was, after all, such a small proportion of his wealth. As soon as this thought entered his mind, he decided to give away every penny for the good of mankind. And he did so. No sooner had he divested himself of all his possessions, resigned to face whatever events life might have in store for him, Abdul Malik saw, during his meditation hour, a strange figure seem to rise from the floor of his room. A man was taking shape before his very eyes, dressed in the patchwork robe of the mysterious dervish. "O Abdul Malik, generous man of Khorasan," intoned the apparition, "I am your real self, which has now become almost real to you because you have done something really charitable, measured against which your previous record of goodness is as nothing. Because of this, and because you are able to part with your fortune without feeling personal satisfaction, I am rewarding you from the real source of reward. In future, I will appear before you in this way every day. You will strike me, and I will turn to gold. You will be able to take from this golden image as much as you may wish. Do not fear that you will harm me, because whatever you take will be replaced from the source of all endowments." So saying, he disappeared. The very next morning, a friend named Bayakal was sitting with Abdul Malik when the dervish spectre began to manifest itself. Abdul Malik struck it with a stick, and the figure fell to the ground, transformed into gold. He took part of it for himself, and gave some of the gold to his guest. Now Bayakal, not knowing what had gone before, started to think how he could perform a similar wonder. He knew that dervishes had strange powers, and concluded that it was necessary only to beat them to obtain gold. So he arranged for a feast to be held, to which every dervish who had heard of it could come and eat his fill. When they had all eaten well, Bayakal took up an iron bar and thrashed every dervish within reach until they lay battered and broken on the ground. Those dervishes who were unharmed seized Bayakal and took him to the judge. They stated their case and produced the wounded dervishes as evidence. Bayakal related what had happened at Abdul Malik's house and explained his reasons for trying to reproduce the trick. Abdul Malik was called, and on the way to the court his golden self whispered to him what to say. "May it please the court," he said, "this man seems to me to be insane, or to be trying to cover up some penchant for assaulting people without cause. I do know him, but his story does not correspond with my own experiences in my house." Bayakal was therefore placed for a time in a lunatic asylum until he became more calm. The dervishes recovered almost at once through some science known to themselves. And nobody believed that such an astonishing thing as a man who becomes a golden statue, and daily at that, could ever take place. For many another year, until he was gathered to his forefathers, Abdul Malik continued to break the image which was himself, and to distribute its treasure, which was himself, to those whom he could not help in any other way than materially. There is a dervish tradition that clerics present their morally uplifting teachings in parable form, but that dervishes conceal their teachings more completely, because only the effort to understand, or the efforts of a teaching master, will create the effect which will really help transform the hearer. This tale inclines more towards the parable form than most of its kind. But the dervish who related it in the marketplace of Peshawar in the early 1950s warned, "Do not take the moral. Concentrate upon the early part of the story. It tells you about method." The Candlestick of Iron. Once upon a time a poor widow was looking out of the window of her house when she saw a humble dervish coming along the road. He seemed weary beyond endurance, and his patchwork robe was covered in grime. It was evident that he needed some help. Running into the street, the woman called out, "Noble dervish, I know that you are one of the elect, but there must be times when even such insignificant persons as myself can be of use to the seekers. Come and rest in my house, for is it not said, 'Whoever helps the friends will himself be helped, and who hinders them will be hindered, although how and when is a mystery.'" "Thank you, good woman," said the dervish, and he entered the cottage, where in a few days he was rested and much restored. Now this woman had a son named Abdullah, who had had few chances of advancement because he had spent most of his life cutting wood to sell at the local market, and was not able to extend his experiences of life in such a manner as to enable him to help either himself or his mother. The dervish said to him, "My child, I am a man of learning, helpless though I may look. Come, be my companion, and I will share great opportunities with you, if your mother agrees." The mother was only too glad to allow her son to travel with the sage, and the two set off along the road together. When they had travelled through many countries and endured much together, the dervish said, "Abdullah, we have reached the end of a road. I shall perform certain rituals which, should they receive favourable acceptance, will cause the earth to open and reveal something the like of which is given to few men. This is a treasure, concealed here many years ago. Are you afraid?" Abdullah agreed to try, and swore to remain constant, no matter what might happen. The dervish now performed certain strange movements and muttered many sounds, in which Abdullah joined him, and the earth opened. The dervish said, "Now Abdullah, listen carefully, paying complete attention. You have to descend into the vault which is exposed before us. Your task is to possess yourself of a candlestick made of iron. You will see before you arrive at it the treasures the like of which have seldom been revealed to man. Ignore them, for it is the iron candlestick alone which is your goal and aim. As soon as you find it, bring it back here." Abdullah went down into the treasure vault, and sure enough there were so many sparkling jewels, so many plates of gold, such amazing treasures which cannot be described because there are no words for them, that he was completely bemused. Forgetting the words of the dervish, he filled his arms with the most glittering prizes he could see. And then he saw the candlestick. Thinking that he might as well take it to the dervish, and that he could conceal in his wide sleeves enough gold for himself, he took it up, and remounted the steps which led to the surface of the earth. But when he came out of the hole, he found that he was near the cottage of his mother, and the dervish was nowhere to be found. As soon as he tried to show his gold and ornaments to his mother, they seemed to melt away and disappeared. Only the candlestick was left. Abdullah examined it. There were 12 branches, and he lit a candle in one of them. Suddenly a figure like a dervish seemed to appear. The apparition gyrated a little, and then put a small coin on the ground and disappeared again. Now Abdullah lit all 12 candles. 12 dervishes materialized, moved in rhythm for an hour, and threw him 12 coins before they vanished. When they had recovered from their amazement, Abdullah and his mother realized that they could live quite well on the yield of the candlestick, for they discovered that they could obtain 12 pieces of silver each day from the dance of the dervishes. But before very long, Abdullah thought of the incalculable riches which he had seen in the subterraneous cavern, and decided to see whether he could have another chance of getting some real wealth for himself. He searched and searched, but could not find the place where the entrance of the cave was. By now, however, he had become obsessed by the desire to become rich. He set off and travelled through the world until he came to a palace, which was the home of the miserable dervish whom his mother had once found tottering near her home. This search had occupied many months, and Abdullah was pleased when he was ushered into the presence of the dervish, whom he found to be dressed like a king and surrounded by a horde of disciples. "Now," said the dervish, "you ungrateful one, I will show you what this candlestick can really do." And he took up a stick and struck the candlestick, whereupon each branch turned into a treasure greater than all the boy had seen in the cavern. The dervish had the gold, the silver, and the jewels taken away to be distributed to worthy people, and lo, the candlestick was seen to be standing there again, ready to be used anew. "Now," said the dervish, "since you cannot be trusted to do things properly, and because you have betrayed your trust, you must leave me. But because you have at least returned the candlestick, you may have a camel and a load of gold for yourself." Abdullah stayed at the palace overnight, and in the morning he was able to hide the candlestick in the saddle of the camel. As soon as he got home, he lighted the candles, and he struck the whole thing with a stick. But he had still not learned how the magic was accomplished, for instead of using his right hand to hold the stick, he used his left. The 12 dervishes immediately appeared, picked up the gold and jewels, saddled the camel, seized the candlestick, and vanished. And Abdullah was worse off than before, for he still had the memory of his ineptitude, his ingratitude, his theft, and his nearness to riches. But he never had another chance again, and he was never again wholly at ease in his mind. This tale was set in a Sufi school as a development exercise for a number of students who were regarded as too literal-minded. It refers in a disguised form to certain dervish exercises, and indicates that harm or uselessness may befall those who carry out mystical procedures without having overcome certain personal propensities.